Good morning and welcome to the West Suburban Chamber of Commerce and Industry's 2022 Legislative Breakfast Series. My name is Kathleen Russell and I serve as the CEO of the Chamber. At this time, I would like to invite Jerry Bergen, our past board president of our board of directors, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jerry. On behalf of our board of directors, I would like to thank our diamond sponsor, UPS, for their support of today's breakfast and investing in the Chamber as a regional partner. A special thank you to Garson Hansen, the Chamber's past president, for making our legislative breakfast series a priority for our Chamber. Thank you to our gold sponsor, FMBC Bank and Trust, and Bill, our past treasurer. Thank you for being here and your support. Thank you to Advent LaGrange Hospital. I'm sorry, the name changed. Advent Health LaGrange, McCook Athletic Expo, Republic Bank, and Proxit Inc. for their commitment as regional partners. I would like to take a moment to recognize a few of our attendees. Mayor Sean McDermott from the city of Countryside. Thanks for hosting us again in Countryside. Terry Carr, mayor of McCook and candidate for Lyons Township Republican committeeman. Dr. Jim DeCipio, president, Village of LaGrange Park. Alice Gallagher, president, Village of Western Springs. Mark Kukler, president of Village of LaGrange. Melissa Niedermeyer, president of Willow Springs. John Ryan, mayor of Alsop. Terrence Carr Sr., trustee, Village of Willow Springs. Bob Mandikich, trustee of Village of McCook, and Kevin Russell, trustee, Village of McCook. And a special thank you to Ryan Gleason, who is with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, who is here today to join us. Founded in 1902 with a simple vision to build a vibrant and prosperous community of thriving businesses that understand the value of collaboration, the power of a unified voice, and working toward the greater good of the community, the West Suburban Chamber of Commerce has grown into a regional chamber serving 8 communities in West Suburban area, including members representing an additional 63 zip codes. We appreciate the support of the LaGrange Business Association, LaGrange Park Chamber of Commerce, Western Springs Business Association, and Westchester Chamber in helping promote today's event. It is my pleasure to introduce Steve Palmer, moderator for today's breakfast. Steve is a lifelong resident of the Village of LaGrange and is a strong believer in community service. He was appointed to the Metro Board of Directors in 2016, serves on the Lyons Township Mental Health Commission, the Board of Directors of the Illinois Restaurant Association, and is a past president of the West Suburban Chamber. Steve is owner and operator of the Stadium Club at the Max in McCook. Welcome, Steve.
And Steve is not running for office, just so you know that right off the bat. All right, well, anyways, welcome, and thank you for being here for our second breakfast. This series, I think, is important to do and important for us to be able to understand, know more about the politics of our community and our area and the politics of what's happening with our country, and to be ready and to be responsive. That is our job as business owners. That's our job as citizens. So thank you for being here today and for being a part of this. We're going to have a very fun time. The way we're doing it today is a little Jeopardy question and answers. So that will be different than what I think most of our candidates are used to. We're going to ask our candidates to please abide by time limits and things that are given to them, but speak freely. And let's get to know you by the way you answer some of these questions today. So right now I'd like to call my partner up, who's Tom Serafin. Tom's the principal, the founder of Serafin and Associates. He's been a Fox News analyst and many, many other things. I can say that Tom, what you will find out when he gets up here, has the voice for radio and the hair for TV. Mr. Tom Serafin.
Takes me a long time in the morning to get that hair done. Thank you, Steve. And we have, before this started, about an hour ago, we picked hats out of the hat, the sequential order of how the candidates would be seated up here, and the incumbents, the mayors, the two mayors, and the two Congress folks. So I will read off that list now, and we were given bios on everybody, and I would ask so that we can get right into the questions that the candidates will feel free to identify themselves and some of their high points in some of the questions and answers. So therefore, we won't spend 5 minutes of me reading about all the bios. And if that's okay with the candidates, that'd be terrific. Rob Cruz would be number 1. Sean Casten, number 2. Maureen Newman, number 3. Gary Grasso, number 4. Nikki Conforti, did I say that right? Conforti. Would be number 5. And Keith and Scott would be 6 and 7. So I would ask the candidates to come up here right now, please, and sit. There's 4 microphones, and you'll need to share them up here. And the rules are very simple. We'll start with number 1 here, which would be Rob Cruz. He'll pick a category off the board. We have pandemic, national security, taxes, economy, Supreme Court, environment, and other. Underneath will be questions. All the questions are about the same in seriousness, obviously. So the numbers are there just to finish the idea of a Jeopardy kind of board. So we thought we'd have some fun, give the candidates the opportunity to select those issues they want to respond to, and at the same time, pass it off to their colleagues. We're missing 2. We're missing Sean Casten and Maureen Newman.
Sean's here.
Oh, Sean's here. Okay, great. Kathleen Russell from the chamber will be Vanna White, and selecting the names, the numbers as the candidates let us know about it. So if we're ready to start, candidates, you all know each other, so I apologize for the bios, but it would take a long time, so just make sure inside your answers you identify some of your history and some of the high points. I know somebody you loves U2 and loves Mariah Carey and others, so you might want to talk about who you are and what you represent.
Sure.
Okay.
So I'm up first?
Rob's first.
All right, let me put this over here.
Pick a category and a dollar amount.
Well, is this on? Yeah. All right. Let's start with the pandemic for $200 right off the bat.
Pandemic for $200. Thank you. Do you support the idea that government can require immunizations against COVID-19?
I answer the question then first? Absolutely not. I think it's a personal decision for people to make. There you go. Sorry. I think government should not be able to mandate anything that is required for a medical decision. I think that should be up to the individual and their doctor personally, and any businesses that do so should have to face any consequences from losing labor or whatnot.
You have a few more seconds left on your answer. You want to talk a little bit about Project Exile?
Sure. Project Exile is a project that I researched out in Richmond, Virginia. Excuse me. Similar instances that we had here in Chicago. You know, we had poor leadership at the state's attorney's office. They were having high crime rates. What they did is they had a short-term partnership with the federal government, and any gun crimes were prosecuted at a minimum 5 years. Their gun rates went down their crime rate went down 36% in 10 months and 60% in 10 years. I think that's something that needs to happen out here in Illinois.
Thank you. We have Congressman Newman here with us this morning. We also have Congressman Casten. Good, good. Thank you for being here. What we're doing is selecting a category and then a question amount. The question then you take and you answered. Okay, so you're next in line, and the categories are right here, sir.
Sounds good. Well, let's go to my strong suit. Let's do environment for let's top on the board. Let's take the biggest one on the board for environment.
The biggest one?
Sure.
Oh, sure.
Okay, here's a question. What is in the way of plastic bag moratorium? And what are your ideas for increasing reusable bag usage?
I'm shocked that's the $1,000 question. In the grand scheme of environmental issues, that one is not, that one's way down the list, quite honestly. We can do things to have plastic bag moratoriums, it's great, I encourage everybody to recycle, to use those bags that you bring with you. But the most important thing we've got to do is we've got to cut CO2 emissions.
Victor.
We have this amazing opportunity.
Can't hear in the back.
We have this amazing opportunity in front of both to avert climate disaster and to put more money in our pockets, because everything we do to lower CO2 emissions means we don't have to spend money on fossil fuel, and we don't have to send money to Vladimir Putin. We have a challenge with plastics that the industry knows that those jobs are going away. Exxon is currently trading at a 7 times multiple. Tesla is trading at a 70 times multiple. The private industry, you guys in the private industry, you know what that means, right? And there's a push to try to increase plastics use as a way to drive that up. And it's because they're trying to make sure that they can use the refining assets that they have to keep markets for that stuff. It's going to go away, and that's a great thing. It's not going away fast enough. We've got to make sure that as we transition to a cleaner economy, we both make sure that those gains are equitably spread, and we make sure we look out for the folks who have been working in those manufacturing sectors and providing those jobs, because the private sector otherwise is going to leave them behind. So I'm encouraged by the direction the private sector is going. Plastics are a small piece of the puzzle, but we can do this for greedy reasons. We can do it for national security reasons. We can do it for environmental reasons. But in all cases, let's do it.
Thank you. Congressman Newman, good morning. We're happy you're here. You pick a category and then a question amount.
I think I'm going to pick pandemic. Am I again?
Pandemic.
Yeah.
For $400?
I will.
Okay. Now, the numbers on the board where it says 2, 1, 6, 7, 8, 9,000, they don't represent the severity of the question, but we have there for
So
the
we shouldn't be
continuity of
afraid,
the
right?
board. So these are all questions submitted by members of the audience or from people from home we've solicited through the chamber website. Do you support continued mask mandates?
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for all being here today, and thank you for everybody taking time to ask questions because it's important. So here's what I believe is that we've had mandated vaccines for kids in school for decades now, and we should continue that. So if the coronavirus vaccine is part of that, that's really very important to keep our kids safe. As we know, in federal situations that you have the option of mask mandate or testing, I think we should continue down that path. So at the end of the day, everybody should have a choice of either taking regular testing, masking, or a vaccine mandate. But I do believe in mandates for vaccines in school.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. That's terrific. So we're going to go on to the mayor. And we did not introduce everybody formally again, so in your remarks, you might want to, you have a minute to respond. You might want to talk about a highlight or 2 or 3. So, Mayor, you pick the category and the next question.
Thank you, Tom. Let's see, is this on? Yes, okay. Tom, how about pandemic again, 4,000?
Pandemic for 1,000. Mayor, should we be seriously investigating to get to the real legitimate origin of COVID-19?
Well, sure, as an academic exercise. Let's solve the problem first and get moving forward in our economy. I'm Gary Grosso. I'm the mayor of Burr Ridge, uniquely qualified for this district now because Burr Ridge straddles both Cook and DuPage counties. 40% of Burr Ridge is in Cook. That's where all my businesses are. And what we did during the pandemic was balance health with economics. It's easy to just tell people to do whatever they want to do. That's not, to me, responsible government. What we did as a board, and you never do these things alone, you do it as a board, is confront the problem. And so what we were faced with in 2020, like all of you were, was how to do that. And we did that by leaving our businesses open. We told the governor we weren't going to do that. We weren't going to close down. And we distanced, we social distanced. We masked where people wanted to mask, and that was a voluntary thing. And we sent stipends to our small businesses so they could meet payroll and they could and pay their rent. So I handled the situation in Burr Ridge by balancing health, and economics. Whether or not it came from China, I believe it came from China. I was not opposed to the president saying it was a China virus. We call it Ebola. We call many things from where they are. But finding the cause may help us in the future. But right now, we have to go forward, solve the problem, get our economies back on level ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Next candidate we have is Nikki Conforti. I said that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay,
Thank you
great.
so much.
Category and question, please.
I'll take taxes and the economy for 200.
Oh, this is a long one. The new budget has substantial funding for program expansion in many areas, as well as infrastructure improvements. All sectors seem to be experiencing major workforce shortages. You can't implement new programs without workers. What is being done to address the overall workforce shortages?
Well, thank you. Yes, as we know, everyone is crying for workers. Small businesses, large businesses, and we cannot grow the economy without a labor force. And the shortage has hurt us in pushing up wages and pushing up prices and impacting inflation. So the labor shortage will be fixed and needs to be fixed sooner rather than later. By number one, we need to end the pandemic entitlements that have kept workers home. We need to get people back to work. There also needs to be we need to fill the gap in the educational system. Right now, there's a big gap between those graduating from high school and not wanting to go to college. They have no path forward. So we have to work with trade schools and skilled certification schools to get those people back in the workforce. Also, there's innovation that's occurring across the nation in industry with robotics that will fill lower wage jobs and help us balance the workforce that way. Inflationary issues, as you know, are on the rise, and that needs to be addressed right now in Washington, D.C. Right now, the Fed is increasing interest rates, and they're doing it rapidly, but in my opinion, they waited too long and they weren't aggressive enough, and that's just the typical solution. As an economic major from the University of Chicago, I believe that we need to take a full scope 360 approach to attacking inflation. We need to address the issues in the supply chain, we need to address the issues in the labor force, and we need to address the rising prices in raw material prices as well to help with inflation.
Thank you.
And
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next candidate, and remember this is part of the West Suburban Chamber of Commerce Legislative Series all year. Kathleen Russo and Mr. Palmer are hard at work along with the board, and we thank you for the support that the board has given this series. So please continue to come back. And now we're going to move to the mayor. Tell us who you are and what city you're mayor of.
I'm Mayor Keith Pecaw. I'm mayor of Orland Park.
Terrific. And category and question, please.
Tom, I will take national security for 600.
National security for 600. I feel like Ed McMahon. Are you concerned about the Ukraine war escalating into nuclear war?
I think everyone who pays attention to what's going on in the world is always concerned about a conflict breaking out into nuclear war, especially in consideration of Russia, who is really a third world country with nukes. That's what they are. And the head of Russia is obviously someone who is potentially unstable. And one of the reasons we've gotten here is because we haven't operated from a position of strength, and we've put Russia in this position where they can hold this over Europe. Because we should have been, for a long time, have been energy independent and providing energy resources to Europe. Liquefied natural gas, fossil fuels, everything that they're getting from Russia now, we could have been supplying. When I was chairman of Vets for Energy, from 2008 to 2018, we talked about this, and in 2015, we talked before 2015 that supplying this energy security for the United States is national security. And being able to supply that to Europe would have eliminated the ability for Russia to step into Ukraine in Crimea to begin with, and then would have stopped them from doing it again. I'm the one person up here that has experience with this. I flew F-15Es in the Air Force for 9 years. I was an instructor, weapons system officer. So I have 3 tours over in southern Iraq and 150 combat hours. So I know what I'm talking about when it comes to national security, specifically around Russia, because I trained to fight and defeat both Russia and China. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your service. Our next gentleman candidate is Scott. And Scott, pick your category, identify yourself, and the question that you're looking for. You should be able to receive that. And that's an interesting question because your history with your dad, Val, and everybody else where they came from has something to do with foreign relations. But pick your category and your question, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'll pick Supreme Court for, I guess, 200.
Supreme Court for 200. Will Illinois keep abortion laws legal?
Timely. My name is Scott Casper. I'm an engineer, a lawyer, father, and husband. I live down in Orland Park with my wife, Beth. We've been there for about 12 years. Abortion. Well, I'm pro-life, and this is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. What we are seeing at the federal level is perhaps the unraveling of Roe v. Wade, which will send the issue back to the states. And I believe that that's actually the right solution. And Illinois has some of the most, I suppose, aggressive laws on the books with respect to abortion or allowing abortions. I do not see that changing in Illinois, but that is a debate that the people of Illinois need to have. And I believe that's where it's rightfully resolved at the state level.
Thank you very much. We're going to go back to Rob Cruz. And Rob, pick your category and your question. And when you get into the answer, tell us where you went to college, because that's an interesting story.
Sure. I'm going to go with, let's try other, and we are in the 6th district, so we'll go for 600.
600 in other.
Yep.
Do you support the recent Florida law that prohibits teachers from teaching sexual orientation and gender identity from K through 3rd grade and leaving it up to the parents?
First I'll start. My name is Rob Cruz. I probably didn't say that enough. I'm a father, husband, cancer survivor, small business owner, and I came from the advocacy realm arena. For the question, I would say I agree with that law. And we had this topic of conversation a lot where I'm out on the street meeting with parents, meeting with different groups. It's not that we don't want to talk about gender identity. It's the way we're talking about gender identity. I have a same-sex marriage in my family. My sister is in a same-sex marriage. We did not need to show my daughter any graphic imagery on describing what her sexual orientation was. There's no reason to show kids that young any kind of imagery that would give them a false sense of normalcy or whatnot, because the truth be told, when I was a kid, and most kids do, it's monkey see, monkey do. Little kids see something, they want to emulate it. They see something in a book, they want to try it, they want to do it. We don't need that right now. We need kids more focused on learning skills to contribute to our society. From my college years, I went to Millikan University for the first year, then I went to the University of Dubuque, but I had to leave early because my dad was also a service veteran like Keith, but he struggled with some PTSD and mental health issues, which is something I want to bring to the forefront, because I think whether you're Republican or Democrat, when you go home and someone has a mental health issue, it affects everybody's life.
Thank you, thank you. Congressman, we want to also, everybody, thank our 2 Congress people from Washington, D.C., from our hometown, to be here, because I know you're very busy, just like the mayors are. You all have jobs. So category and question, sir.
Let's do taxes and the economy, whatever's next on the board there.
Taxes and the economy for 400. Do you support raising taxes on anyone or corporations?
Well, as all of you know, our tax code is perfect and doesn't need any modification.
Now, these are questions from the audience and from the people on our website.
So if you look at tax revenue right now, tax revenue as a percent of GDP is about 19%. It was about 21% before the tax cuts that Trump put in place, and that created $1.7 trillion of deficits. It was predominantly dominated by corporations, and 30% of U.S. equities are owned by foreigners. So we took $1.7 trillion, sent 30% of that overseas. It was horrible. Didn't do anything. It boosted dividends. The single most important thing that we could do to improve our tax system is to simply fund the police. Now, what I mean by that is funding the IRS. This is a shocking number. The Trump-appointed head of the IRS told us that the gap between the taxes that are due by Americans every year and the taxes that are paid is $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion a year. When we talk about these big budgets, remember, like, should we do Build Back Better? Bernie Sanders wanted to do $8 trillion. Joe Manchin wanted to do $1.7 trillion. That was over 10 years. We could have funded the entire thing just by making sure that the IRS had the resources to go out and collect that. And unfortunately, it's become very partisan in Washington to actually make sure that government can do its job. And what happens, and again, this was the Trump-appointed head of the IRS who told us this. He said that the consequence of that underfunding is that they only prioritize audits for the simplest returns, which means that the poorer you are, the more likely you are to get audited. When you look at the amount of tax fraud we have in this country, the inefficiency in the system, we don't need to do that. Now, when we went back, in the Build Back Better negotiations, and we're trying to figure out how to pay for this, we said, let's fix that. That's a no-brainer. Let's put that in. So we said, what do you need, IRS? We got the number. We put that in, and then we asked the Congressional Budget Office to figure out what that was going to cost to score. Like, how much revenue can we get from that? And they came back and said that we'd get about $160 billion from that over 10 years. And we're sitting there saying, wait a minute, I thought this was $1 trillion a year and we're only getting 160 over 10 years. And they said they have been underfunded for so long that they could not confidently say how long it was going to take to get there. The IRS doesn't have an electronic records keeping system for all their old tax files. That is a conscious choice that has been made by people who have been sent to Washington to make sure our government doesn't work. And I don't think any of us want to work in an organization where you don't have the budget to do your job. So that's the single most important thing to do. We can talk more tax policy beyond there, but that's a low-hanging fruit that should have been done a long time ago.
Thank you. We're going to try to keep this moving because when you get back to answering questions, if you wanted to follow up on something you hadn't said earlier, feel free to include that. Woman Newman, thank you for being here this morning. Category and question, please.
Thank you. And I apologize. I didn't know we had the opportunity to do introductions. So I'm the Congresswoman Marie Newman for the southwest suburbs and the western suburbs currently. So pleased to be here. I'm a former small business owner. I started a national nonprofit and led that for a couple of years. I've also been an advocate in healthcare equity and economic equity.
And we'll need the category and question.
Sure. I think I'm going to go with the surprise of other, and whatever number you choose, Tom.
Other for 200.
Love it.
Oh, wrong one, sir.
This one is about crime. Do you support the Kim Foxx approach to fighting crime?
Can you clarify what that is? I don't know what that means.
Well, that's a question that came from our audience. So I would think the criticism about the state's attorney's office in releasing and people with monitors, I think. Catch and release. Thank you. Probably that versus what happened before with Anita Alvarez, right. And before that, the state's attorney's office has always been an interesting place to do business when it comes to criminal justice.
Yeah. So what I'll answer is that and broadly. So one of the things that's most important about my congressional office is that I actually meet with my constituents. And my constituents are everybody from standard community residents to law enforcement to practitioners in the anti-violence area. And so we actually, going back to my campaigns, I've had regular meetings and a coalition set up between law enforcement, community residents, and practitioners. And the reason we've done that is because I like a holistic approach to things. I like to bring all the stakeholders together and problem solve together. So that's what we've done. In fact, I'm meeting with that group tomorrow morning on May 2nd in Bridgeview. You are all invited. So one of the things I think it's most important is that we have to invest in the community and invest in our police. As I talk to police officers every day, there's three things going on. They're asked to wear 7 hats every day. They sometimes are a mental health provider, sometimes they are a domestic abuse provider, they are a social worker, sometimes they're working out just standard household stuff for folks, healthcare, community services, and public safety. That is completely unfair to burden each officer with that ridiculous amount of expertise. So my goal in talking to law enforcement and the community is to solve those problems on the ground. I'll tell you, I was on with Flannery on Fire a couple of months ago, and he said, what are you going to do about crime? And he said, and I know your answer. I said, what do you think the answer is going to be? He said, well, you're going to say it's not my area. And I said, no, it's everybody's goddamn area. It is everybody's problem. We have to keep everybody safe. So the reality is that not only federal politicians, but state senators, state reps, and everybody has to come together. We have got to address this in a way where we're keeping communities safe. And so for me, it is important that we have everybody together. And we've actually set forth an agenda on the ground and legislatively to make sure that we fund both communities as well as the police to make sure that everybody's safe.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Mayor, category and question, please.
Thank you, Tom. Well, we've only had one national security. Let's have another.
National security for 200?
Oh, go in the middle somewhere, right?
Oh, 800.
Okay, that's good.
400.
800's good.
I was going.
Question, why did our United States military fail so miserably in withdrawing from Afghanistan?
Poor organization, bad intelligence about the willingness of the Afghan army to fight, just not knowing what you were up against. And there was no reason to do it so quickly. There was good reason to do it properly and slowly. It's fundamental that you have to protect your people. What's the number one job of government? Protecting people and property. Those were our troops, those were our people over there, and our government failed so miserably to put them first. You have to put people first in what we're doing militarily. And so I'm concerned. I'm concerned that the way we are handling ourselves, the American dream, is not going to happen. We are putting our priorities in the wrong way. My wife, Janet, who's here, we've been married 43 years. We've raised 6 children. We have 6 grandchildren. And I'm very concerned that our government is going in the wrong direction. And when you see what they did in Afghanistan, you know we need change. It's time for serious leaders to handle serious issues. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Mayor. Nikki Conforti, category and question, please.
I'll take environment for 200, and I'll take a moment to introduce myself. As you know, I'm Nikki Conforti. I'm not a politician. I don't hold elected office. I'm just one of us. I decided over a year ago to make this run because I didn't like what was going on. I believe in the greatness of this country, and I'm willing to go to Washington, D.C. and fight for conservative values. I'm a single mom. I'm the daughter of an immigrant. And although I'm not a veteran myself, I come from a long line of veterans all the way back to my grandfather fighting in France in World War I. So I definitely have the fight in me.
Thank you. Thank you. The question on the environment. Environmental laws can often drastically affect small businesses. What ideas can you share to ensure complying with these mandates without putting undue financial strain on already struggling businesses?
Thank you. Yes, as you know, the administration today is pushing 100% renewable, 100% renewable energy by 2030 and EV by 2035. And this is adversely impacting businesses, not only small businesses, but large businesses as well, including farmers. John Deere has approached large farmers downstate, pushing them to change their combines and their other farming equipment to EV. And the problem with this is that those gas-fired engines need to run during harvest season 24 hours in order to get the crops into the silos, process them, and get them to market before they begin to rot. The problem with renewables is, number one, they don't travel 12,000 miles like some of these farms are 12,000 acres big. because there's no EV stations out there, and there's no, and they don't run. So there's no way that they can run 24 hours and do the work that gas-fired engines are doing today. So what we need to do is we need to continue with a multi-pronged approach for environmental issues. Yes, we need renewable, but I think 100% renewable is not feasible, not only for the reasons I've stated, but additionally because in order to provide for the battery storage, we need to mine. We need to mine the very earth that we're trying to save. It'll be destructive. Waste is an issue. We all live in Illinois. How many of you have been down Highway 55 and seen the wind farms? And how many of you have seen those that are not moving, that are not operating? How do you dispose of them? Where do you put them? Additionally, the sheer cost.
Thank you. What, you wanted another sentence? But we have to move on to the mayor next. Do you have a...
All I'm saying is we need a multi-pronged approach. We need to be listening to the needs of the industry, and in order to spur economic growth, we cannot cripple them with federal policy.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the mayor, but before that, I want to thank everybody for being here this morning. You got up early. Members of the media, the Chicago Tribune, WLS Television. It's just a wonderful morning for us to be able to sit down and talk with the candidates who will eventually represent us in Washington in a very important time of our lives. Mayor, please pick a category and a question.
So I will take taxes and economy for 600.
Taxes and economy for 600. Do you think taxes will be raised on Illinois taxpayers once the infrastructure money, COVID money, is gone?
So Illinois taxpayers, obviously this is for Congress, but I do believe that if the voters continue to vote for who they voted for, they have demonstrated that they will continue to try and raise their taxes. There was an effort, as you know, for what they called the fair tax, which fortunately was defeated. So there will be a continued effort time and time again to raise your taxes. They've raised gasoline taxes. They've raised, and what you don't know is at the local level, they've taken away the local distributive fund, which instead of 10%, it's 6%. So for Orland Park, that's $5 million a year for the last 10 years we haven't gotten. That's money that comes out of your pocket that requires your municipalities to raise taxes on you to cover their differences. That's absolutely going to happen. I'm also going to jump on one thing that from Gary Grasso's question. The question was that the military failed. The military absolutely did not fail. The military responds to the orders of civilian leadership. That was President Biden's failure. He directed them to leave way too soon, and he left our troops behind, and it's unacceptable.
Thank you, Mayor. Scott, you're way at the end of the table. Pick a category and a question.
I'll take national security for whatever's next, 400.
National security for 400. How far should the USS's involvement in the war in Ukraine go?
How far?
How far should it go? How far should our involvement in the war in Ukraine go?
Yeah. I think what's unfolding in the Ukraine right now is a very tragic situation, and it is because of a failure of leadership in this world, quite frankly. I'm not for sending our troops to foreign wars. I think it was a great idea that we did get out of Afghanistan. The way that we got out of Afghanistan was unacceptable. So I certainly don't want to now shift troops up to the Ukraine, and I do believe that is a powder keg that could lead to more aggression in Europe, certainly looking to where my father came from in Latvia, the Baltic republics. They would be next. At the same time, we need to send a message to Putin and to other aggressive leaders in this world, such as China, that aggression will not be tolerated, and that has to come from the President of the United States. I do believe what we should be focusing on with Ukraine is assisting the Ukraine people to fight their war, and that means providing the weapons they've been asking for, and that also means, identifying Russian oligarchs throughout the world, and there are many in this country, and working to prevent their assets from funding that war.
Thank you, Scott, and it's good to see young people involved in wanting to run for office. 10 seconds on where you went to college, what you studied.
Sure. I went to the University of Illinois. I graduated in 1998 with a degree in mechanical engineering. I worked for a couple years as an engineer, and then I went to law school. My grandfather and great-grandfather were lawyers. I wanted to follow in their footsteps. I went to Drake University in Iowa and graduated 2003, and have been practicing law since that time.
And where do you live?
Orland Park.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Rob, you're the next one up. Category and question, please.
Let's go with taxes and economy for 800.
Taxes and the economy for 800. What can Illinois 06, what can the representative congressman from the 6th district do about inflation in Illinois?
Well, inflation didn't happen with one person, and it won't be fixed with one person, but I do think some suggestions could be, becoming energy independent again, working to supply, like, for example, Russia's ally or, enemies or whatnot with energy. We have to get back to manufacturing. I think that we have witnessed over COVID that supplies take longer, things cost more because we're depending on others to do the things that our parents and grandparents used to do. I had a great conversation at my table talking about how we can involve people who went to school who are now, I wouldn't say complaining, but they're a little upset about their student loans and would like them to be forgiven. One of my ideas is let's modify their loan to get them into these manufacturing sectors, into these construction sectors. There's roughly 1.2 million jobs out there that are not filled, according to economists all over the country. I would say, and then, trying to transition into immigration. This country's always had immigration to come in and do those low-paying jobs. We have to be united on that front, streamline immigration to get people in here, legal permanent residents to work. Yes. Every trade union has them, every construction contractor has them, manufacturing plants have them. We need to make it easier for them to come in and fill those jobs so we don't have to rely on other countries. And that's how inflation will go down, because today we're expecting a rate hike today. And if we get another one, 6 out of 8 times that's happened, 3 times we've gone into recession. And this will be the second time in 14 years. And if that doesn't get you upset about your leadership, then I don't know what's going to get you upset about your leadership.
And they're saying a half a point, right?
At least a half a point.
Okay, thank you. Now, that question, again, love to have young people involved. Dane, you submitted that question, so thank you very much. Young man right here in the blue sweater. So, maybe someday he'll be up here as well. We hope. Congressman, category and question, please.
So I realize I apologize for getting here late, but since I think I'm the only one. So I'm the current representative of the 6th District. It's been my privilege to serve here for the last 2 terms. I'm on the Science Committee that oversees our research budgets, the Climate Committee that oversees all of our climate policy in Washington, and the Financial Services Committee that oversees a lot of the issues that have come up here. I'm a chemical engineer by training, spent 16 years running small businesses and then building a company in Westmont that grew into an $80 million business, and we sold it in 2016. And then I had a midlife crisis and got into this line of work.
Well, now let's go to the Jeopardy board.
Let's take national security.
National security for
2,000 or 1,000.
Oh, let's go 2,000. Let's do 1,000.
Did I say 2,000?
Yeah. As much as you're offering, I'll take it.
Yeah, wait.
Whoa, wrong one, sir.
There you go. What should our China policy be about Taiwan?
Boy, these are meaty questions. I think a lot of this follows on what's happening in Ukraine right now. China would like nothing better than to take Taiwan. They are watching closely to see whether or not we are united. The rise of authoritarianism globally. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. The rise of authoritarian globally over the last 6-7 years has been something that the Chinese are very eager to support. They don't share our values, our support for the post-World War II order. Our last president didn't either. And I think it's safe to say that a part of the reason why Russia invaded Ukraine is that they thought they could get away with it. They knew that Angela Merkel was holding the post-World War II order together, and when she stepped down, they looked at divisions in our country and thought they could flex in. It is fantastic to see a united NATO. It is fantastic to see bipartisan support for providing military aid to Ukraine and standing up to Putin. It's the first time in my experience in Washington that that's existed. The question now, what we do with China on Taiwan, is as they are watching that unity from the United States, not just from the United States, but our ability to bring back that post-World War II rules-based order, it's given them pause. That's not to say that we slow down. It's not to say that we don't make it clear that we will continue to be the country that walks softly and carries a big stick. But we've got to be willing to continue to show our support for the people of Taiwan, for the democracy that they represent, and our ability to be that leader that the world wants. I'll leave you with just when I was in Madrid as part of the climate conference. This was after the United States had pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. 12 of us were selected to represent the United States. I was one of them. We were sitting there in those meetings, and a European came up to me and he said, you know, we have it in our experience that when the United States doesn't lead, bad things happen, and we need you back. We are back, but it's brutal, and we got to stay there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congresswoman, category and question, please.
I will take taxes and economy.
Taxes in the economy for 1,000. With rent, property taxes, and home sale prices rising, what, if anything, should the federal government do to address the growing affordability crisis?
Agreed. We have a housing crisis and a wide variety of labor shortages and on and on. So I sit on the Small Business Committee and the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So as part of my job on transportation and infrastructure, I sat on the subcommittee that talked about dispersal. Super, super sexy topic, right, is how do we disperse the money? But importantly, I'm a former management consultant, and the way you do that is to get it to the people that can spend the money the fastest and most appropriately and rigorously so that we have better infrastructure, stronger infrastructure, and we have jobs, right? So, so with that, making sure that with the infrastructure bill, the $1.2 trillion gets to not just the state, but to the communities, to folks, unions, and other folks that can use it immediately was very important. So getting that out into the ether is very important. Secondly, I sit on Small Business Committee, and my first 5 bills addressed 2 critical issues for our small businesses: access to capital and taxes. So the very first bill I put together, and my first 5 bills were bipartisan bills. So my first bill was to reduce taxes for small businesses. We increased the business deduction by 5% so everybody's taxes would come down. And that actually is headed towards the Senate right now. It passed overwhelmingly in the House. There's a lot of small business people in the House. And then secondly, very importantly on the small business front, is access to capital. So the next 4 bills that I've passed through the House with a co-lead being my Republican are access to capital and providing SBA measures that will allow people to get access to capital immediately.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor, category, please, and number.
Okay, and Tom, just let me tell everybody a little bit more about my background. Aside from being a husband, father, grandfather, I was the first in my family ever to get an education. My dad was a garbageman, worked very hard and became a fireman. My mom was a secretary and a waitress, and they instilled in me the American dream, and which is what I'm fighting for now. I went to Georgetown University. I went to law school at night, worked full-time, and got my law degree. I met my beautiful wife at the time, and we came here. And I have been not only a mayor of Burr Ridge for 10 years in 2 different stints from 2005 to 12, and then again since 2019, but I was also on the DuPage County Board for 6 years, and I was the chairman of the 911 board in DuPage County, where we consolidated all 18 PSAPs call centers, got down to 2, and we saved the taxpayers $9 million.
Okay,
Now I see, Tom,
we'll
other,
need
please.
category
Yeah.
and other.
Right. Others?
For 400?
And 400, good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We have more questions that we couldn't fit on the board, so we'll continue to go around until the clock ticks. How do you encourage women and minorities into leadership positions in your organizations?
Well, we encourage them. Who discourages them? My wife and I have been equal partners since I met her. My daughter is a thriving young woman of 28 years old and has had every opportunity to better herself. I was when I was elected mayor in 2005, I took over and took my seat. I was a trustee, and someone else resigned. We had 2 openings. And so as the mayor, I get to nominate. I went around our community and went to an African-American gentleman and asked him to become a trustee. I did that for the very reason that he was successful and accomplished, but he was also an African-American. And we had no representation at all, ever, in Burr Ridge of African-American on the board. And so I sat with him and his wife, and he said, "Are you asking because I am an African-American?" I said, "Yes, but only because you are accomplished, you are educated, and you've been a leader in our community. And therefore, I want you to help me run this village." So I've always encouraged that. Female and diverse. I grew up in a diverse community. I was my best. Look, as children, you don't know about prejudice or differences. You're taught that as an adult. What we should be doing is just measuring everybody based on their abilities so that they can all prosper in what is the greatest nation in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Nikki, category and question, please.
Yes, I'll take Supreme Court for the next one in line.
Supreme Court for 400.
Yes. And just to give you a window into my professional experience, I'm a businesswoman. Today I'm an energy consultant. I'm an MBA in healthcare, so I worked with large healthcare systems, including Adventist with Hinsdale Hospital. I owned a small business in the job market, and I'm an econ major, as I said. So this will help me best understand legislation and make better decisions to benefit the people of the 6th District.
Thank you. This is just your average question. Illegal immigration. In the last 2 years, illegal immigration has exploded and is overwhelming our country in manpower, drugs, and dollars.
Agreed.
Do you support keeping Trump's Title 42 in place to help slow down that flow?
The short answer is yes. I support keeping Title 42 in place. The larger answer is we have a crisis on the border, and we need to address it immediately. Talk about national security. It is putting our national security at risk. So when I get to Congress, one of the things I'd like to push forward is an immediate support and refunding on the Border Patrol. We need to also try and address those that have already crossed the border. That number is in the millions. Mayorkas has said that they know where they are, so we can use that information to begin to track them and start to do health checks and background checks. And also what we need to do is, and I saw the Senate just put forward a bill yesterday regarding this disinformation committee. We need to repeal that as soon as possible because that is also will hurt national security.
Thank you. Mayor, category and question, please.
Well, first, since everyone else is giving the rest of their background, obviously, as you know, as noted, I was a veteran, also a mayor. In between, I was a small business owner, and I do have a family with 3 kids and a granddaughter. Arizona State Aerospace Engineering and an MBA from Duke as a Fuqua scholar.
Thank you. Category and question, please.
The only one I can see is national security for 200.
National security for 200. We have a lot more of those too. Okay, sir. What is the top issue in our national security? What is the top to our national? I guess they were saying, what is the top issue regarding national security for the United States?
Well, obviously at the forefront is Ukraine, but the top issue is that we are not identifying the biggest threats. The biggest threats to this country are Russia and China. And until we acknowledge that those are the biggest threats to the U.S., we can't address it. And how do we address it? We address it by becoming energy independent. We address it by being able to produce our own energy and export energy to the rest of the world. We are the cleanest producers of energy in the world. We should be doing everything. We should be doing fossil fuels, we should be doing nuclear, we should be doing renewables, we should be doing hydrogen, we should be doing all of it. What that will do is it will bring costs down for people to come back to the U.S., manufacturing back to the U.S., instead of funneling money to Russia and China and making them stronger.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I want to say thank you to all of you for being here this morning, and all our friends on C-SPAN and the people that are streaming this broadcast. We want to say thank you very much for everybody that gave us questions. We have more questions than we have time for, so I'll shut up and go to Scott. Scott, category and question, please.
Sure. Is there a taxes and economy one left? Or have we exhausted
Yes,
that?
taxes and
All
economy.
right, next one.
200?
Sure.
$200. Does Illinois have a future in manufacturing? How would you bring back manufacturing jobs to Illinois? My second question answers the first question, but the question is about manufacturing in Illinois.
Yeah.
What's the outlook?
Yeah, and this is an incredibly important topic for our district. We have a lot of manufacturing that has left this district and has gone outside the state primarily, but outside of our country, and that's almost entirely because of the taxes and regulations that we have in place here. A lot of it is at the state level. We have very business prohibitive policies as a state. So obviously that's not something I can address in Congress. But what I do want to address in Congress is making this district a more attractive place to bring business, to grow business, and for business to stay. We've done a really good job of exporting good-paying, high-skilled jobs outside this district. You know, my water heater went out a month ago, and it took me a while to find a plumber. And I finally found a plumber, and he came in, and like 2 hours later, I went down to my basement in the utility room, and he had replaced the water heater, but the rat nest of pipes that were in my house from when the house had been built were all cut out, and there was like brand new copper pipes that were streaming on in. I mean, it looked like a work of art. And I looked at him and I said, "What did you do before you did this?" And he told me he was a pipe fitter down in the refinery off of 55, and he was laid off 6 months ago. Why? Because we're throttling the production. That used to be the biggest producing refinery, or second biggest in the United States, and we are consciously limiting the production of oil out of that. Not only does that make us have our $7 a gallon gas, but it also is taking away tens of thousands of skilled, probably the best skilled jobs for pipe fitters. So we can reverse a lot of the policies in Congress that are causing that, and those are energy policies and those are tax policies, and that's going to foster more jobs here.
Rob is going to take the next question, and in this round, we're getting near the end. We hope to get all the way around the table, but I would ask you just abbreviate your answers a little bit, if you could, please, and identify your websites. Nobody's mentioned their campaign websites. You're all running for office. Here, we want to be informed, so we're all going to go to your websites to find out more about all of you. So make sure you mention how to get in touch with everybody's campaigns. Go ahead, Rob.
Sure. Let's go with other for 1,000.
Other is for 1,000. Do you support restriction on gun purchases or other stricter gun control measures, including citizens' access to automatic weapons?
The answer in the short term is no. I think the Second Amendment was granted us by the Constitution to protect ourselves. Just kind of going into that, talking about why you need to protect yourself, because crime is running rampant all across this district and all across the country. In Philadelphia, Houston, Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. I had a friend of mine who's a really close friend, a mentor. He's a police officer in the Oak Brook area, and we were talking about the police, and all the gun stuff. And he said, qualified immunity is not out of the woods yet either. I don't know why a sitting congressperson at state, local, or federal level would ever take away a qualified immunity from a police officer, because his description was, then you have to protect yourself. So you have to walk around with a firearm, and you have to decide whether you're going to take somebody's life or not. I don't want that decision. And so I do believe if we keep a strong Second Amendment, especially in neighborhoods like I grew up on the east side of Joliet. I come from the advocacy world. I worked on that fair tax amendment bill. I had the mailer that went out right before the election in 2020. I stood out with the police in Grant Park and was asking, why are we even thinking about doing this? So When you grow up in a poor neighborhood like I did and there's gangs and drugs, having a gun on you is not abnormal. And having the right to carry one, I believe, is inherently our right from the Constitution.
Thank you. Congressman, category question, please.
Just because it looks so lonely up there, let's do Supreme Court.
Supreme Court for 200.
Sure. Yeah, no, everybody's staying away because I think it's the separation of powers. We're all trying to stay in our legislative lane.
Here we go. Congressman, if the Constitution needs to be changed, how should it be done? Through court decisions or by amendments?
I think that's spelled out in the Constitution. If we're going to change the Constitution, the only way to do that is an amendment to the Constitution, and that would require that we go through the process, get supermajorities in the legislature, and send it back to the states for ratification.
Thank you. Thank you
I
for
think
being
that's an easy one.
succinct.
Yeah.
Yes. Congresswoman, you're next. Category question, please.
I like the surprise, so I'm going with other, and you decide for me which one you want.
Other. Thank you, Kathleen. Oops. What will you do next if you are not elected?
Good question. It's what. Definitely not going to Disney World. I guess we haven't thought about it a lot, but I think the first thing that we would do is my family and I would sit down and talk about that, because there's lots of ways to contribute. I intend on winning this race very clearly, but there are lots of ways to contribute. And I certainly, whoever ends up being our congressperson, and important to note, whether they are Republican or Democrat, I would support them, because it is desperately important that we have someone that the voters choose and that they represent. I take my title representative incredibly seriously. It is not just you, or you. It is everybody in this room, whether you voted for me or not. This morning, I'll tell you why I was late, that there were self-identified, I didn't know there were 4 Republican families that have huge immigration issues right now. So I spent the entire morning on the phone with the Polish embassy and others to make sure that these families get assimilated and have what they have from both the Afghani refugee situation as well as the Ukrainian. So representation, to me, is everything. So no matter what happens, I hope to still contribute to all of you, but I do need you to know that right now I am your representative and I represent everybody, and I'm so proud to do so.
Thank you. And my grandfather came through Ellis Island, 1903 from Poland. So we appreciate all the work you do, Congressman. You all do to help out our immigrants that are trying to get here and doing the right thing. Mayor, you're next for category and question.
Thanks, Tom. We have that in common. I think we probably have that in common with everybody in the room. Some ancestors come through Ellis Island. Yeah. Certainly mine did too. First of all, I have a very complicated website. It's called GaryGrasso.com. And since we're still living in the pandemic, and it looks like maybe there's only one left, I'll take the last question.
Pandemic for 600. Should our students in elementary schools be vaccinated and masked?
That's a parental decision, not the government's decision. Look, we're a nation of choice. We're a nation of choice and consequences. But based on the science now, based on the low degree of positivity, and based on the fact that our health system is handling easily what's happening right now in this country, and especially in this state, no, that is a parental decision. It's not a school board decision. It's a parental decision whether or not they want to have their child vaccinated or whether or not they want to mask them.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Nikki, category and question, please.
Thank you. I can't see, but I see a lot of taxes in the economy, so I'll take those.
Taxes in the economy for 400. Do the wealthiest 1% of Americans pay enough in taxes?
I think we all need to pay more taxes, equal taxes. I don't think we need to pay more taxes. I believe as a nation we are collecting enough. I believe we're not allocating it properly in Washington, D.C. So when I get to Washington, I'd like to be on the budget committee and see how and where the money is spent and make necessary changes to benefit the American people.
Thank you. Mayor, category and question, please.
I have an original website, keithpecaw.com.
Nikki, do you have a website?
Yes, I do. Thank you for asking. It's Conforty, the number 4, Congress.com.
Thank you. Mayor?
After that last other question, shoot me another one.
Other for 400. What are you currently reading, and what podcasts do you listen to?
So I don't have the time to listen to a bunch of podcasts, but I am reading Gods and Generals, which is about the Civil War, and it follows 4 of the generals of the Civil War. So specifically Jackson, Lee, and Hancock are the 3 that are followed the most.
You recommend that book?
I do recommend that book, but even before that, I would suggest reading Killer Angels, which is a phenomenal book about the Civil War and about leadership that was highly recommended in the military for military officers to read, and I suggest that any business person would benefit from reading that book.
Thank you, Mayor. Scott, category and question, please.
Certainly. Well, let me first tell you my website. My website is casperforcongress.com, and Casper is Kaspar. My father came from Latvia, so that's a truncated Latvian name. When he came over here, the immigration officer renamed him, but it's AR instead of ER.
What year did he arrive?
He came here in 1949, and then he became a citizen about 10 years later.
Thank
He
you.
actually came to this district. He met my mother, who is a fifth-generation Illinoisan. Her great-great-grandfather founded Inglewood. So think about that for a minute.
Good. Category and question, please.
Sure, let's do another taxes and economy one.
Taxes and the economy for $200. For $600. What specific policies or programs do you endorse or would pursue to combat inflation?
Sure. I think we've touched a little bit on inflation earlier. President Trump achieved a phenomenal growth in our economy primarily through cheap fuel. And right now, there's no coincidence. We have the most expensive fuel costs right now, and our economy is absolutely stifled. We need to unleash our energy. That's going to cause a ripple effect throughout the whole economy. Not only is our consumers going to have more money to spend, but it's also going to allow for businesses to continue to grow, and that's going to bring the cost of everything down.
Thank you. Who hasn't mentioned their website yet? Rob, go ahead.
So, I'm the youngest guy here, so I'm going to do the website and the social media, right? At Cruz for IL is our social media hashtag or handle, and it's robcruz4forcongress.com.
Thank you. Thank you. At this point, I'm turning it over to Steve Palmer, to ask the last question. Mr. Palmer.
First things first. There we go. First things first. Thank you, Congressman and Congresswoman, for serving. And thank you to all of you up here for wanting to serve. That's pretty darn exciting for our community. We have this many people willing to step up. Now, there's been something in the past, and it was called earmarks. It's sometimes called pork, all sorts of things. But it's benefited our community. It's benefited the city of Countryside. It's benefited Hodgkins. I think every town in here can say somewhere or another an earmark or something from past congressional districts or congressional members have helped our community in more ways than one. And actually, we can almost say that the resurgence of LaGrange in our downtown LaGrange through an earmark that helped us get a parking garage really set us for the way that we are in a business community and things in downtown LaGrange. So it's done good things, but it also gets this bad name. It's sometimes called pork. So I'd like to hear your opinion, each of you, on earmarks and things like that we can use to bring back to our communities. And we're going to start the other direction. So instead of starting right here with Rob, we're going to start with Scott.
Part of my goal of wanting to go to Congress is to actually reduce the size of our federal government. It's bloated beyond belief, and earmarks are part of the problem. We need to actually have a real budget from the federal government that starts at the committee level and, actually has some thought put into it. We get these omnibus spending bills that arrive at 3 a.m. and they get passed without anyone having read them. In Congress, I'm going to say no to that. I'm not going to allow that. And I think we need to focus on actually having the budgeting process go through the committees and percolate upward as opposed to coming from the Speaker of the House.
Thank you. Mayor?
I agree with Mr. Casper that we have a spending problem. And one of the problems with earmarks or pork or whatever you want to say is it becomes very, very political, and it doesn't necessarily get to where it belongs. And I'll give you a perfect example of something that recently happened. We had ARPA funding going out throughout the country. And it was allocated, if you were less than 50,000 people, it was allocated in Illinois at $135 a person. The 46 communities above that received it via an allocation formula from the federal government that was voted on by Congress. That formula gave over $700 a person to the city of Chicago. Now, mind you, 135 was the average. That's what LaGrange got. Orland Park got 85. Naperville got 86. Tinley Park got a little over 100. Basically, the suburbs were shortchanged on something, and COVID hit everybody. And what those numbers showed is that Congress felt that the people in the city of Chicago were worth 5 times more than the average person in the state of Illinois. They're worth 7 to 9 times more than the people in the suburbs. That's unacceptable. If we're going to have programs like that, let's allocate it by per capita. That takes all of the politics out of it. It takes everything else out of it. Everyone has needs. And then allow them to spend it as we have, but let's give it to everybody equally so that they can choose what to spend. So LaGrange can choose what to spend, Orland Park can choose what to spend, Wheaton, Lisle, everyone in the district can choose what they want to spend it on. But Chicago shouldn't be giving money. And one more example of that, Oak Park, 52,000 people, got $38 million. Orland Park, 59,000 people, got $5 million. That's purely political. That has nothing to do with helping the people. So we need to help the people equally, regardless of whether they're Republican, Democrat, color, race, gender, anything. We need to help people equally.
Thank you. Ms. Conforti?
Thank you. As you've stated, good things have happened and come about because of earmarks. The problem, though, as Scott Casper has alluded to, is today in Washington, things have gotten off track. And there's not a lot of common sense out there. When bills get to be 2,700 pages and you're given 12 hours to read it and make a decision how to vote, that's unreasonable. And earmarks are a part of that problem. So what I'd like to see happen is, number one, to shrink the size of the bills, but also to categorize things. It doesn't make sense to vote on one topic at a time, but why not silo it? Why not and include earmarks within those silos? It'll make it more reasonable. It'll educate the congressmen and know what they're voting on so they can vote, and I can vote when I'm in Congress on what's really beneficial to the people of my district. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor?
Thank you. The job of a congressperson is to bring money back to the district. It's our tax dollars in Washington. And there's collaboration between municipalities, state government, county government, and the federal government. Let me give you an example of why and how it can work well. Burr Ridge had a culvert that failed. It endangered the Elm School, it was at the Salt Creek, and it was flooding properties and neighbor properties. We tried to find the money in our budget. We did Band-Aid it from time to time, and we couldn't find all the money. But we did collaborate with our representatives. Representative Caston's office was one, Duckworth was another. We were able to get the money to get that done. That's what government should be doing, and that's what I would do as a congressperson, make sure the money properly for proper projects were brought back to our community. That's a precise safety issue that was solved in part by collaboration with the municipality and the federal government. And it's pork when projects get added on to things that are not the main bill that's there. And that's what's wrong, and that's what I would fight for. Transparency is the issue, and bringing our tax dollars to our district is the important thing for good purposes, not to line other special interest pockets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Congresswoman?
Well, this is something that's incredibly near and dear to my heart because process is important to me because I was a management consultant. I worked out a lot of operational process at the very largest of companies and nonprofits down to the very smallest. So I want to clarify a couple of process things. So I waved down to the Appropriations Committee a couple times to request that our process is better. And what I requested is that it for sure comes from the committee level. And actually this time it did come through the committee level and went through all of those appropriate stages. And it is a 2,700, and sometimes the bills have been 3,000 to 4,000 pages long, to be clear. But you don't receive it overnight. You have 99% of it over the 6 months prior to that, and then you get red lines the night before. And you do get it in the middle of the night, to be clear. But the reality is that you know 99% of it, and then you review the red lines as you go. So that very popular media depiction of us looking at a 2,700-page bill, we're not. We've read all of it before. At least I read all my bills. In the reality, that's the process. It is not perfect. But I will tell you that two things, that earmarks no longer exist, to be clear. We do have community-funded projects. And I waved on to the committee for that process too. And what I asked for is that we actually build criteria with all of our community partners, including businesses, nonprofits, community-based organizations, and residents, to make sure that we're getting money to those folks that A, deserve it and can manage it. In my office, there wasn't a process like this before. We put together a set of criteria by which we would propose to the committee in which you would receive money. And so we prioritized them, we helped the communities work with it, but we worked together with the community. I didn't throw money at people. We got information from them, who needs it the most. We assessed it with the committee and gave it back to those. So the community-funded projects are what you're talking about. We no longer have earmarks in Congress. And I think the best way to do it is to make sure that we get input from the community. My office did. My team, I have to give my kudos to my team, is amazing. They spent about 3 months on this process and worked for, and we're back in that process now. So God willing, we get it all out there soon.
Thank you. Congressman?
So it's important to understand what the situation is. We actually changed the rules to bring these back. The Congress had voted to ban this process, and we brought them back in the last Congress. And as you heard from Mayor Grasso, this is really important stuff. Why would we possibly, if we're in positions of leadership, say, I don't want to actually represent my community. I'm going to vote to give the Department of Transportation a budget, and then I'll leave them to figure out where to best spend it. Our founders gave us this government that we are supposed to represent our communities. We're supposed to advocate for our communities, and we have the power of the purse. And so what we did to address the abuses is we said we can propose projects. They cannot go to for-profit entities, so we can't have any conflict of interest there. They can't go to people that we have any personal ties to. We have to disclose all of the projects that we proposed, that we asked for, whether or not they were funded. You can find it on our website, so you can see what we asked for, and then they go out the door. And it's been, whether it's your issue, Mayor, with the culvert that you needed and the leak that we provided on Elm Street. We had a sanitary sewer in Downers Grove that was overflowing. Got $1.8 million for them. We helped out with some transitional housing for folks in the LGBT community who are homeless, and got some resources put in place for them. These are the things that we know our community needs. They're really, really important. I do just want to mention this issue about the American Recovery Plan. There's a structural problem in Illinois that everybody in Illinois should be screaming from the rafters about, and that's the United States Senate. The reason I say that's a problem is that the states like Illinois that generate wealth, that have high concentrations of people, effectively subsidize lower population states that aren't generating wealth. And we do that because in the Senate, every state gets 2 votes. And so we've really been pushing, myself and Congressman Foster have been on this lonely fight to say we need to get to per capita funding, because right now Illinois is subsidizing people to live in Kentucky. Why are taxes lower in some of those other states? It's because they get so much more federal money. If Illinois got the same per capita Medicaid match that Indiana does, Illinois would not have any hole in its budget. That's the scope of what's going on. And so the result is we put burdens on local communities to raise local taxes to cover those services. We did push in the American Recovery Plan to get that per capita funding. We got closer. The disparity between the towns was because we tried to index it to where we saw spikes in unemployment and collapses in budget. It wasn't exactly right. But we got much more money for Illinois and for our communities in Illinois than would have been there otherwise. But it was only in that American Recovery Plan. We still need to fix the structural spending problem in the Senate.
Thank you for your answer. And last but not least, Rob.
Sure. Well, for one, thank you for having me here. I stand up here today, and I really do feel like a representative of my generation and the generations that are coming after me. And a lot of the talk is, what do they do with all this money? And the question is who's doing it with the money? Younger people out there, or people who weren't involved before, feel like it's a stewardship issue. It's the reality is, and I'm a cancer survivor, so things are what they are. And the porking or the special projects are never going to stop because communities need them. It's who's stewarding the money and who's placing it where it needs to go. I live in Oak Lawn. I'm a South Side kid. And I know one thing that we have been screaming from the rafters for a long time is we have a terrible drainage system. It is awful. It runs off of 95th Street. The place is flooded. It's been going on there since I moved into that district for 10 years. So if I were to be elected to Congress, my first project would be cleaning up this draining system and moving it out because it leads to street decay, rodents, overall, your daily life is messed up. Who was driving around yesterday? It took you 2 times longer to get where you needed to go. So that's how I would handle it.
Rob, thank you for your answer. I want to thank you all very much for being here and for your candid answers today and for being so nice to each other. It was friendly to see politicians actually sharing the dais together and having a great civil conversation. So thank you so much for that. Before you all leave, I would like you to come out in front to get a picture or leave at the dais for a picture, so don't leave right there. For all of you here, I want to thank you all for coming. I want you to remember that it's not just their service that makes our community better. It's your service too. So your service to your community, your service by getting out the vote, and everything else that we have to do as citizens is very, very important. Thank you for being here. We hope to see you at our next breakfast.